BLC Network here with another unboxing. This one a little bit more unique from what we normally cover, but this one is coming from a company called BLG Audio. It's a company based out in China that makes, well, line arrays and other speakers as well. They specialize in live production audio for concerts and events, as well as smaller audio for solutions like car audio and home audio, as well as wireless Bluetooth speakers. But their biggest shining category of speakers that they have to offer is live production, or line arrays, and live or loudspeakers, excuse me. You have smaller cabinets like this, including, I believe, a little bit smaller even, but all the way up to much larger cabinets, including 18 inches and more for their subs. And there's just a lot going for the company, and it's a name that you might never have heard of before because they're a little bit unique. They are a business-to-business vendor, or factory, so they design the speakers, and it's kind of white label. It's OEM. They are ordered, or at least the business-to-business relationships are between them and other companies, such as JBL. We'll just say, just to throw a name out there, and not that we have any proof that JBL uses this factory specifically, but these companies reach out to BLG to help manufacture their speakers, and then they get shipped out to those companies and they rebrand them as needed, put their own labels on there, and or just sell them as BLG speakers based on the speakers that they already have available on their website or catalog. And then that's going to be for special vendors and retailers or resellers online, since BLG does not work directly with consumers. So if you're looking to buy directly from BLG, that is not going to be an option. If you're a consumer, you have to be a large corporation looking to order a lot of these, because they order within giant containers that ship on container ships and planes. So that is BLG Audio. They are a decently large company. They've been around for a long time now, and they seem to have really established a name for them. And you can find more information about them at blgaudio.com. But we spoke with them at CES this year, 2025, and had a fantastic conversation, which led to us wanting to really get our hands on some of these to test them out for ourselves. We heard these speakers at the convention, as well as some of their other models that are much bigger than these. But today we get to talk about their BLA206A series, which is an active speaker series for both tops, or your actual speaker boxes, line array speakers, and subs. And this is just one series that they have to offer, and it's just compact, it's easy to work with, and we just really liked it. It's small, it's lightweight, and it sounds pretty good. And it's also affordable for you companies out there. We can't give pricing information, of course, because it's all dependent upon how many you order and the relationships between you and BLG, and all the various different details, such as white labeling and or buying as is, and so forth. So it's kind of obvious, but pricing is pretty good because this is where everything begins. Then it makes its way to the commercial company, retailer, company looking to rebrand it as their own, etc., and eventually makes it into a storefront, online or offline, and then you see the final MSRP price that's marked its way up along the process so that everybody makes a profit. We have a handful of these speakers and a couple subs that we got in, and we just really spent a lot of time listening to these and playing around with them, and now we get to talk about that and bring that to you. So first off, we have the BLG 206A ABS line array speaker, which is sitting right here. It's small. It's relatively lightweight. It's about 20 pounds. And it looks a lot like, to do a comparison, we'll throw something out there like a JBL SRX series. It looks nice. It's appealing visually, and it has a sound signature that's more similar to, we'll say, a JBL VRX. So it has a new modern look to it, but the sound signature is more of a focus on those higher frequencies, so it can be a little exhausting on the high end, but with a proper EQ, you're able to dial that in and bring some of the body back. Inside this, driver-wise, you have two 6.5-inch woofers and a 2-inch neodymium voice coil. And you have a high-frequency voice coil, also neodymium, that's 1.4 inches, and that is what delivers the sound from this box. Inside, it's, like I said, a very small footprint. 6.5-inch woofers aren't that big, So you're not going to use this for an arena or anything like that, or a general session, but for mini general sessions, for smaller breakout rooms, for the commercial world, and then for live performances, I'd say bars and other special venues that are more smaller in size, where you're not really looking to fill a large amount of space unless you have a whole lot of these. But of course, if you were looking to go bigger, you would go with bigger speakers, which BLG does have to offer. This has an RMS power rating of 350 watts and a max power rating of 700 watts, giving you plenty of power per cabinet. It's just, these can get really loud. We'll just put it out there. It has a relatively large coverage pattern for such a small cabinet. It has a 15-degree throw, top to bottom, and then side to side it has a 100-degree throw. So imagine it as a cone that's going outwards from the speaker, and that is how much of your audience you're able to capture using one of these boxes. Of course, it's an array style box, so you're going to have a number of these to be able to cover your audience. So if you are looking to ground stack or fly these, you have many different configurations, just like you'd find with any line array speaker or series. It has a Class D amplifier inside, so again, these are active speakers. And it offers a number of features such as DSP setup, low cut configuration, and of course all of this using an RS-485 network. You basically are able to dial in the speaker. Now you shouldn't expect something like, say, what you'd find with acoustics with like BLA206A or anything like that. It is a very simple interface, but then again, so is BLA206A sort of, but it's powerful. We'll just say that. BLA206A is, you spend more money for a reason, or Acoustics, you spend more money for a reason. It's a really good brand, really expensive speakers, and they really put a lot into their R&D. So this, again, is more of, I don't want to say an entry level, because it's definitely not entry level by any means. But when it comes to data connectivity with these and what you can control, I would say it would fall somewhere between the SRX series from JBL again, which I'm just going to have a lot of fun throwing JBL in the air because it's more widely known by people, I'd say. But it's a cross between its configuration or configurability and something like, your typical speaker on a stick, like an EV or a JBL PRX series, where you can adjust like EQ and low cut and whatnot. You can do the same thing with this, which is more, because they have a more intricate system that you can log into by plugging it into the Ethernet and wiring everything together, where you can dial in each cabinet. So it is a little bit more than just your typical speaker on a stick. And of course, as a business reaching out to BLG, obviously if you want more, just communicate that with the company, let them know what software you're working on and or features you want to have access to through said software, and I'm sure you can negotiate that with the company just fine. So this is pretty much, I'd say, bare bones in a way, in terms of it gives you the basics of what you'd expect to find with a line array configuration via Ethernet. As for a cooling system, it uses a passive radiator inside, which means there's no active cooling, there's no fans or anything that are running on this. It's a very quiet cabinet, so you don't have to worry about any fan noise when anybody gets near the cabinet, which is pretty common for any small line array box such as this. You typically don't find fans unless you're using much larger boxes with big crown amplifiers and stuff. And now you're talking about active cooling because it's just creating a lot more heat. Where in this case, passive radiator or the passive radiator is more than enough to be able to dissipate that heat that's created by the amp. And as you can tell, I keep touching it. Or at least you might be able to tell by the noise. When it comes to the construction of the box, these are ABS. So you have some aluminum here for the grill, and aluminum obviously for the brackets on the back for your angles, or where you would set your angles. But you have where it's important in terms of rigging. You have your metal. Everything else is ABS. It's molded ABS plastic, giving it a very lightweight feel to it. And again, one cabinet's only 20 pounds. For the size, that's pretty good. Take a VRX speaker, for example, is a little bit more in weight than that. So this is only 20 pounds. It's super light, making this really easy to work with if you're just one person stacking these. Now, speaking of stacking, These are able to ground stack and fly. So if you want to fly these on truss, you are able to, well, at least they come with a bracket, which is used in both configurations. So that typical fly bar will go across the top of the speaker, and you can attach to the truss. Now, the company does give a number of accessories to be able to make this happen. So when you get the flyware kit, you know, all of that comes with it. And that same fly bar also makes use, or is what you make use of for stacking these. So when you get the subwoofer, it's your typical sub pole to tops configuration. So you have your sub, you have a threaded pole that they can provide, which probably is kind of like a default configuration anyways. I'm sure they send that out to everyone or factor that into their cells. And it's your typical, you know, you have your tensioning bolt that's on the side. You can unloosen that, pole slides up, and you have a safety pin that comes in on one of the holes. So when it comes down, that just gives it some extra secureness. So that way the weight of the speakers doesn't overwhelm the actual tensioning bolt. That's just, you know, just gripping the side of the pole and holding it in place. And then on top, there's no extension inside like you'd find with some of the JBLs or EV series. It's just your typical stud that's part of the pole. The speaker, or at least the fly bar, has an adapter that slides onto that. The fly bar attaches to that, and then the speakers stack onto that as normal. And you can stack anywhere between, I'd say, 2 or 3 on a ground stack before you start to go too high. Given that these are only 20 pounds, that makes that easy. Like VRX speakers, you don't normally want to go past 2 because that's just too much weight on those poles. But the poles that BLG provides, they're super, super durable. I mean, and heavy too. They're heavy, but they're super durable, and you can really get a lot of weight onto those because of that. And it's impressive. So 3 of these on top with a ground stack shouldn't be hard at all. So when it comes to connectivity, I'll just spin this around. You can see everything on the back here looks kind of similar to what you would find in any line array speaker. You have right here your data ports. Now this is what you're going to use to connect to them and adjust them via PC or Mac. And it's relatively simple to be able to make use of this application if you choose to do so. If you do not choose to do so, you don't have to use this. This is completely optional, just like most of these systems. Somewhat most of these systems. Some of them you really do want to dial in, such as L-Acoustics. You really want to make use of LA-Net if you're going to successfully hang any of their systems. But for this, it's going to be more like JBL. You can make use of something like this with your setup and control everything from a PC, or if you're looking for a more simple setup, you can just hang this, send signal, and power, and that's all you need to do. You can configure your basics in terms of what you're using it for in terms of your filters here or your DSPs. So where is it in the array? Is it at the top, the mids, or is it facing more towards the crowd close to the speakers, or is this ground stacked and just shooting forward? You're able to control that from here. And then you have your sensitivity as well, right here in the back. And you have some diagrams here. On this side, it's going to give you a diagram in terms of what this button is doing for you in terms of selecting your DSP. So this is what's telling you exactly what DSP is best for what configuration. Then you have your power LEDs and signal LEDs here. Then you have some diagrams here, which are pretty much just telling you the usage of the actual bar within the angle bracket, in terms of which orientation the holes should be in, so that you can easily figure out how you're supposed to be setting your angles. But this shows you the orientation in terms of how the bar should be orientated within the angle bracket as you are configuring your angles on the back. Then you have your typical PowerCon connectors here in the back. You have your input and your output right here. So everything has an input and output. I forgot to mention that over here, XLR. So data, XLR, data, XLR. So data, signal, power. And everything has an in, everything has an out, so that can be daisied to the next speaker. So the PowerCon connection over here, this is just your typical PowerCon. PowerCon is a Neutrik connector to Edison, or Neutrik to Neutrik if you are jumping speakers. So again, blue is in, white is out. It's pretty simple. You can't plug them in backwards. So what you can easily do is run your PowerCon or your Neutrik to Edison PowerCon connector to the sub, and use the large jumper, which the sub does come with, to go up to the first speaker, and then they have shorties to jump from there. and that's how you distribute your power. These do not require a lot of power. So we actually took this, we moved these over to one of the homes and plugged it into a 15 amp outlet, and we had 4 tops going and 1 sub, and we cranked that pretty hard, never tripped anything. I think it was 4. Was it 4? I don't want to give the wrong information. 3, sorry. 3 speakers, 3 tops. 3 tops, 1 sub, and we cranked it. And no tripping of any kind. So we should be able to do even 2 subs, I would say, and a couple tops each. It should be fine in a configuration in a home environment. So if you're throwing a backyard party or anything like that, you should be fine. If you want a little bit of extra safety because you might have a board going and everything else, maybe a full band, then obviously, spread your circuits around as needed so that you're not tripping anything. But on a typical commercial building, such as our studio, we have 20 amp outlets everywhere, so we got a lot more power to be able to share amongst all of our devices. So we could easily set everything up and run it off of one 20 amp breaker, and probably still will definitely not trip anything because it's indoors, and you can only crank it so loud before it's unbearable. So you're never really going to take it too loud. So the subwoofer is a BLA206 sub 15 sub, 15 inches. It has a 15-inch woofer inside with a 4-inch voice coil for that low end, those low frequencies. And that's it. Just the 15-inch woofer with a 4-inch voice coil, and that's all you need because, well, it's a sub. And for a 15-inch sub, which can be hit or miss depending on the brand, there are certain EV models, for example, some of the entry levels that aren't really that great in terms of range. And then they have some better ones. Or QSC has a really good sub. JBL has a few really good subs that are in an affordable price range. And then you have this one. This one obviously is more affordable. Of course, that's because you will be a corporation reaching out to them to order these in bulk for your own purposes to resell and or brand them as your own. But these subs are very cost-effective, and they sound good. They have a lot of punch to them. You can really, really push these without, to a high decibel range at least before reaching any kind of sort of distortion. But this one has a RMS power rating of 1,000 watts, and it has a max output of 2,000 watts. So you are getting a lot out of these little subs and really pushing those 15-inch cones pretty hard. But, they can take it. They have a really good range to them, and they have a lot of power in terms of how much, again, decibel range you can throw at it before you start to distort. And chances are, in any kind of environments that you're making use of these subs in, you're probably not going to reach those distortion levels unless you're making use of them in environments that are just too big for them to handle. So think first before you use to make sure that you have a matched system to your needed environment. The coverage pattern, of course, of the subwoofers, it's a subwoofer, so it's omnidirectional, so it's everywhere and just everywhere, all directions, front, back, sides, slow-moving wave hitting your audience. And it has the same Class D amplifier inside with the same familiar setup that you can use via the Ethernet, the RS-485 network for DSP, for low pass, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The enclosure for the subwoofer is a little bit different. You do have a lot of aluminum in its construction as well as plywood. So it's heavier, and by heavier, I mean heavier. Bigger driver, bigger closure, bigger amp means more pounds. So these subs are about 82 pounds a piece, somewhere around that, nearly 82. I think it's just under 82 pounds, making them pretty heavy for one person to lift, we'll say. So in terms of using proper ergonomics, OSHA, the OSHA rules kind of suggest that in a situation like that, you're lifting over, I believe it's 50 pounds is the limit, is when you really should turn to a coworker or friend and say, hey, can I get some help? It's definitely a 2-person lift if you want to do it safely. When it comes to connectivity, it's the same thing on the back of the subwoofer. You have your data, you have your signal, and you have your power. And you have in and you have out, so you can daisy chain. Again, going over some of the technical aspects of this system, again, you can fly it, you can ground stack it. It comes with the flyware and a bar, and the flyware can be used for both flying it as well as stacking it on the sub using the included pole. Everything is designed to work together, except for the pole. When you're flying it, obviously you'll have that in storage somewhere because you wouldn't be using that in flown configurations. It uses your typical T-pin, or I call T-pin design. These little push-pin connectors. They're pretty much as common gets in the industry. You're either going to have these round heads or the T-pin configuration that you see with some of the JBLs and other manufacturers, but the round configuration is a little bit more common, I would say, and it's pretty robust. It's obviously rated to maintain the amount of weight that these speakers have to them, and very easy to work with. Just need to identify the angles and determine which angles you need for what setup you have, and in that case, that's where you want to play with the software a little bit and or just do basic math. Or if you're lazy, or if it's just a simple small setup, then you can just wing it and use your eyes. Can't tell me that isn't done. That happens all the time. But let's go over some of the things we like about it. Again, we like the range. It looks like a JBL SRX series in a way. Sounds more like a VRX in terms of the tops are definitely more of a focus on their mid highs and highs. And you're going to want to EQ that. So definitely it's recommended not to just simply plug in an MP3 player into the back of these and loop them through the sub and the speakers. You can do that. The option's there. If you're just using music, again, if what it sounds like is good for you, that's great. Outdoors and it's just a pool party or something like that, no one's probably going to care. But if you really want to dial it in to really make it sound good, you're going to want to put a soundboard in the mix. So that allows you to really EQ these speakers. However, again, you can plug into Ethernet and EQ directly inside the boxes themselves. So if you want to do it that way, so you can simply just plug in an MP3 player and go, that's fine. And if you're a DJ, for example, and these are your speakers and you just have the same set everywhere you go, then yeah, you can dial it in via that and just plug directly into your DJM or something, whatever setup you're using. So you have a wild number of configurations here to play with to really get these to work. They're powerful, they're nice, and they sound good. But again, they're exhausting on the highs, so you're probably going to dial that in a little bit to make it not so bright. So that way you have a good balance between your body or as much of the body as you can get out of the 6.5-inch cones or woofers, and get more range out of your highs without having so much of a focus on those higher frequencies. The subwoofer is pretty much good as is. It sounds fantastic. You might want to make some adjustments at the board in terms of how deep you want it to go. But again, the crossover in the back is giving you all that control you need to determine what frequencies are being sent to the sub. So you can go as low as 90 hertz and say, I want nothing above 90 hertz to hit the sub. And then you can take it up from there if you want to add a little bit more range to the sub for whatever setup you have. Personally, I like to go around about 120 hertz sometimes, depending on what I'm trying to accomplish with a setup, and you're able to do that in the back of the subwoofer, and both have their sensitivities. So when it comes to the sound of the sub, I find that we haven't really needed to adjust it much. Unless you are doing a live performance with a band and you want more accurate sound for your kick drums or whatnot, you might dial in a little bit further, but again, even with that, some of your inputs are it's going to be a balance between your inputs and your output to the sub to really get the sound that you need. Just put it that way. I'm not going to do a full tutorial on how to do that in a video, so I don't want to get too deep, or this video is just going to go on forever. But let's talk about things we don't like. So we like a lot about these. We love these speakers. They're affordable, they're durable, they look great, they sound great. There's just a few things we didn't like. For one, they do provide manuals for both the speakers and the subs. The manuals, all they really give you got some specs on the back of the manual, but the manual is really just kind of giving you a basic walkthrough on your connectivity into the Ethernet connection on the back and what that software is accomplishing, or just the interface is accomplishing. It doesn't really give you anything beyond that in terms of customization of the speakers, in terms of angles and flyware configurations and whatnot. So when it comes to using the flybar and some of the accessories that come with it, which it comes with everything you need for the most part, including spare parts, the adapter to go with the pole, but there's no instructions really when it comes to rigging. And that's what we're really getting to on that, is there's no rigging diagrams or instructions outside of the visual diagrams on the backs of the speakers. That's it, and they're very basic. So there's a lot of guesswork that goes into that in terms of, for example, once we unpack the speakers and set up the first sub, getting the pole on it, thankfully we have experience. A lot of us here are audio engineers with a history of live production. So the guesswork was pretty easy for us, but you still had to guess. You know, the bracket that goes on the top, that was kind of obvious. Okay, we found the 2 holes that it connects to. Great. And that's how you ground stack. Awesome. Flying it, also, the guesswork is kind of obvious in terms of getting that going, but it's the little accessories that it comes with. You start to ask yourself, what are these for? Some of these are simply just extra parts, and some of these are adapters to get you going. For example, the subwoofer comes with feet and screws. There's no instructions telling you what those are for, but guesswork will get you to the obvious. They want you to do your own screwing in of the rubber feet, because it's up to you if you want to make use of feet or not. Are you flying it? Are you ground stacking it? If you're not ground stacking it, maybe you don't need the feet and you don't want to bother with it. Or you're stacking it's totally up to you. But that's obvious. But those extra parts with the Flyware system aren't so obvious. They take more guesswork, and you got to try to figure out, okay, there's some screws here. Obviously, some of the screws, they do come with some pins and whatnot that you're going to be using within the Flyware setup. But there are questions in terms of like, okay, this is cool. We have a pin here, but the safety that's coming off the pin, where does that supposed to bolt into or screw into? We don't know. So there's certain things like that to take in mind. There's no instructions to really hold your hand in that process, so it's up to you to figure it out in terms of how you want to have everything connected and or how those accessories are being used in the mix when you're flying this system. So that was the only thing that was kind of off-putting a little bit, but no big deal. In the sense that, again, if you have a pretty solid experience in the industry, the guesswork will still get you where you need to go to make everything work. It's just, yeah, something to keep in mind. That in the future, if BLG is watching, of course, it might be helpful to integrate some better instructions into the boxes, include some better instructions with diagrams and walkthroughs or something, to get somebody started. Let's say if this was purchased by a company that's simply looking to resell these speakers as is. So let's say on Reverb, it's important that the instructions that pass on to the consumer are usable. So let's say a club owner or a bar owner, even better, a club owner gets their hands on these speakers from a reseller, and they're looking at that diagram, or they're looking at the instructions, hoping for a diagram and some kind of a walkthrough in terms of rigging, because let's say that they've never really done this before. They don't really have a background in audio and they're trying to wing it. They're going to have a hard time, and they're probably going to end up having to reach out to somebody to do it for them, which of course in the end is kind of preferred or recommended anyway. So if you are a bar owner out there looking to invest in speakers and it isn't immediately obvious in terms of how everything goes together and works, please, for the love of everything audio, definitely hire an audio engineer to come in to do that for you, so at least your system is installed properly and safely, so that you do not get fined by OSHA or anything, and or, God forbid, nobody gets hurt. So definitely want to be safe about stuff like that. But diagrams are always helpful. Load ratings and things like that, always helpful to have in some kind of a manual, so that way you know what your limitations are for the system and what all those accessories are for. The second thing that we wanted to focus on, we found that the bracket that goes between the pole and the fly bar, when you're ground stacking it, has too much play in it. So when you're stacking these speakers on top, the fly bar and the speakers wobble. And it's sometimes difficult to get them to sit straight. Now, is that going to really affect the functionality of the speakers? No. You're still going to get what you need from those speakers, but if you are definitely a hardened audio engineer who's really obsessed with dialing in your environment perfectly, when you have wobbly speakers, your angle's just off a little bit. Again, it's not going to be that big of a deal, but visually it is, because it's going to look like somebody didn't know what they were doing or something when they set it up. It's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Those speakers are tilting slightly. Should they be tilting? So there is that. And it's just because there's a gap where the bar, the bracket, connects with the fly bar. There's gaps in the sides between the fly bar and the bracket, as well as a small gap underneath that bar. So it's just wiggling in there. So could be better to have that redesigned so it's a nice flush set there that doesn't have much wiggle room in there, so that way it prevents it from sliding around. Now, the one way around that is you can just put some, kind of wood wedge in there, or 3D print something for the bottom, just to run across the bottom of the actual bracket. On the sides, maybe some felt or some foam or something like that. It's just, you can stick on in there to help, kind of seal that gap and stiffen things up, and you should be fine. But that is something to point out because it does seem like something was missed in the design of things, and there shouldn't be any play in there. That's just kind of weird. Now, when you're flying it, you're not going to have that issue. This is only when you're ground stacking it with that adapter, but you want your system to look neat. You want it to look just as neat as it sounds if you want to really maintain a professional image. So that's something that we immediately took from the setup as, okay, that could be better. So between that, the instructions, those are the only two really heavy things that we're emphasizing in terms of things we don't exactly like. But beyond that, we absolutely love these speakers. Nothing's perfect. That's always important to point out. Nothing is perfect. There's some systems out there that sound amazing, look amazing, but the rigging and their angle process is complete trash. It's overkill, like they just over-engineered it and had no idea what they were thinking. I'm not going to name off names, but there are some systems out there that are just super annoying, and you start to question yourself, why? Why did they do it this way when they could have just gone the same route that everybody else does that works just fine? But in this case, they are doing what everybody else does, your basic angles, so it's super easy to set these up, to set the angles, to ground stack them, to fly them. It's really simple. And again, mass configuration. When it comes to options, you got all your options. There's just so many things you can do with these, and they sound good. You just got to dial them in. Like mini speakers, like the JBL VRX, you just have to dial them in, and they won't sound bad. And I mean, they don't sound bad, but they could always sound better. So little configuration goes a long way with any speaker. So there you have it. This is the BLA206 series from BLG Audio. Again, you can learn more about BLG Audio from blgaudio.com, where they have all of their series listed from their live line array speakers that are both passive and active. They have options for both. They come in multiple different sizes. They have some pretty big subs, and they got these smaller subs that we've been using. And they also have, again, audio for home that it looks like they're kind of just breaching into that atmosphere, as well as car audio, which again, looks like they're just starting to breach into that atmosphere. So definitely their history comes from live audio for line arrays, and you can figure out everything, or you can see everything that they have on their website by visiting them. So if you are a company looking to get your hands on some of these and order them in bulk, that is where you would begin your communication to reach out to them by phone, by email, and so forth. This is our first time, well, second time really, but this year is our first year ever to get experience with this company. We had a great conversation with them at CES and earlier this year, 2025, and we loved what we heard, which is what led to finally sitting down and talking about them. So we'll have more information online at POCnetwork.net. We're going to have a full story about this later on once we've had a little bit more time to test it out and figure out what we want to talk about. Again, that's going to be POCnetwork.net. And if you liked what you've seen here, don't forget to subscribe. Click that subscription button and follow us, as well as the like button, so we know that you like this specific video. Analytics matter. And of course, make use of the comment section underneath to chat amongst each other with us, or even the manufacturer in case they are listening. Manufacturers love input, and the best manufacturers listen, so definitely make use of comment sections anytime you have a chance to express your ideas, suggestions, complaints, or anything else. And as always, we thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time. If you want to stay on top of all the latest and greatest, or at least the gadgets we cover, remember to subscribe right here. Subscription button. Click it. You're going to want to. There's lots of videos, interviews, previews, all sorts of stuff. Button. Click it.